Welcome to Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell. This is the place where we dive into the world of talent acquisition, explore the challenges of today's workplace, and discover what it takes to build a thriving and successful organization.
My guest is Sunny Bonnell, the branding wizard and leadership guru who's shaking things up in the business world. As the brains behind Motto and co-author of Rare Breed, Sunny's not just talking the talk, she's walking the walk, helping big name companies like Google and Microsoft level up their game and inspiring folks to embrace their inner rebel along the way. Sunny, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Sunny, what first got you engaged or even interested you about getting into branding?
Yeah, well, my co-founder and I were in college, and I was studying to be a veterinarian. She was studying to be a writer, and we were
Obviously, branding. Yeah, there you go. Veterinarians and writers. That's the equation.
exactly. So we were moonlighting as graphic designers for musicians, and just really fell in love with it. And so we took the leap. We were 20, 23, 22 at the time. We both drop out of college and start creating a business focused on working with design and brand for small teams and companies. And right out of the gate, we started working directly with leadership teams to sort of set not only the vision for where they were going, but trying to help them align around that bigger dream, that bigger vision that they had, how to get them working towards a similar strategy, and then move them towards how to execute and drive that down through the brand. And we started doing that work really, really early on. And then very quickly we're able to scale it. This was in 2005. We were then able to scale it. We got a few key clients on the roster. And then from there, the rest is history. So my partner and I just jumped right in as two young women. And here we are, almost 20 years later.
That's fantastic. So in your work, are there strategies, and if so, assume there are, what strategies do you recommend for fostering an environment that really, this is a common topic that I like to talk about a lot is, how do we foster an environment that respects diverse viewpoints in the workplace?
Well, I think that the best ideas really live at the intersection of tension. That's where innovation happens. And leaders have to create a culture where debate isn't seen as a threat. It's a spark. It's a spark to exciting debate, exciting conversation, and ultimately creativity. And so at Motto, we really encourage what I would call kind of these creative collisions where differing opinions don't divide us. They bring and create something really extraordinary. But I think that you have to build a certain type of culture, and you have to be a certain type of leader or leaders to be able to create that kind of environment where that type of energy can really thrive and that type of possibility can thrive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and I think it is a culture where, or an environment where people feel safe to say, yeah, I can disagree with you, and it's not going to threaten my job. It's not going to threaten my position. I'm just getting my opinion out, and people will respect. I mean, I think there also, as part of the culture, there needs to be a respect that is part of that culture as you listen.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, we have kind of a culture at Motto of our big motto and war cry is do big things. And one of our kind of core principles around that is to really honor the sharp edges. And what do we mean by that is we really believe in healthy conflict. So we don't believe in fake harmony. We see a lot of fake harmony in teams. We work with leadership teams all around the world and have worked in some of the biggest brands on earth, everybody from Virgin to Hershey's to Microsoft to Google to the Minnesota Vikings. We've worked with very, very visionary teams. And the commonality between those teams that really thrive and have this kind of creative collisions, if you will, is that when differing opinions arise, they treat them as opportunities to sharpen the thinking. And that's really what we believe in at Motto as well. Is we've had teams at odds over things like creative direction, where do we take this strategy or where do we take this organization And we have differing ideas of how to do that and how to get there, not only internally, but with our clients. Sometimes their view of what they're doing needs to evolve or needs to be challenged, or, for us to be able to push and pull. And so instead of choosing sides, we always try to zoom out and ask, like, what serves the brand's vision best? And the answer sometimes is a blend of both perspectives, and just trying to find the breakthrough that you need in order to unite everybody and move everybody and keep that momentum going.
Yeah. So for some of our listeners, I'm sure they've run into the conflict aspect of this before. But can you give an example of how Motto has successfully navigated some of these team tensions arising from differing opinions, so people might get a little bit more visceral example of how this might work?
Well, I think it's a baseline. We worked with a client recently who had, they're a very big name in the NFL, and they're incredible team, incredible team of visionaries and bright-minded folks. And one of the things that they were struggling with was they had multiple vision statements. So they had interdepartment teams that all had kind of a vision, and then what they were lacking was a clear overarching vision. So a lot of people were not sure, metaphorically speaking, which rabbit to chase. What was the priority? If all of them were important, if all these vision statements were audacious and big and bold, and we should pursue all of them and try to make them, a reality. How What was a priority and what was not? And so one of the things that we did with our work is we tried to first identify what is the one thing, not selfish, because vision is typically, or should not be selfish. It shouldn't be selfishly motivated, meaning it's not driven by ego. It's actually driven by the world in which you hope to create. So we talked a lot about, just as an organization, drop the departments, drop everything else. Like, if we were just to think about the one true North Star, the world that we hope to create for the people that we hope to serve, what would that be? And that unification of identifying that broader statement kind of helped everybody to finalize and articulate a North Star that everyone could rally around, support, and help build. Then we started to say, okay, departmentally, what is the mission and the objectives and goals that you will have to help you as a department, as a silo, whatever it is that you're doing, the group that you're in? How will your mission help support that bigger vision? And once we kind of explained that, it was really a powerful, it was a powerful moment, because they were able to get clear. And clarity equals confidence, particularly in organizations of any size or scale. And the bigger you are, the more complicated it becomes. And so we overcomplicate these things rather than simplifying. And so our job is to sort of help teams find the language, but to also help find the clarity.
Fantastic. Yeah. Again, just restating. So you were able to help them clarify the overarching North Star, big vision, et cetera. But each of the various groups then didn't have to take that specific North Star, but what they were working on had to lead to it.
Correct.
You have
Correct.
very different objectives, sub-objectives, if you will.
Yeah, because if you're in a marketing department, your work might need to serve a different purpose, short and long term, than it does to the overarching brand. But your loyalty is to that upper vision, to that top tier vision. A lot of organizations have a different understanding of what a vision is, what a mission is, what a purpose is, and what a brand is. And so some of our baseline setting when we're working with teams at Motto is just to help them all understand, what do we mean when we say these words, so that not only do you understand, but your entire organizations has the same definitions of those words that we're using on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so I'm reminded of a famous photograph of John F. Kennedy visiting the NASA Space Center. I don't know if you're familiar with this, and
Yeah,
he's
good
talking
story.
to a janitor, right? And he says, "So what are you doing here?" And he's like, "I'm putting
A
a
man
man
on the
on the
moon. Yeah.
moon." And it's fantastic because again, it was that common vision, but he had his work to do, but he saw how it connected.
Mhm.
It's fantastic.
Purpose
Great.
is a very motivating thing in an organization. It's a crucial it is a must-have in any organization, but more importantly than having it is being able to communicate it and also to be able to mobilize around it. So in diagrams, even in, our teachings when we're working with teams, one of the things that we often talk a lot about is teams often will talk about the why and they'll talk about the how. But at Motto, we actually believe that one of the most important parts of that equation is the who, the people of the culture, because you have to get believers and buyers into your vision. They need to also support it so that they can feel that their work matters. And when you're working with them, you're able to communicate at every level what that vision means for them.
Yeah, so let's dive into that just a little bit more. So as leaders are trying to communicate a company's long-term vision, especially, if anything right now, I think it's times we're in a time of uncertainty.
Yes.
In 2024, 50% of the world's countries went through an election. Many of them changed. And so there's this whole degree of uncertainty. What's going to happen? What's going to change? What new policies, et cetera. In times of uncertainty, what are some things, or how do leaders effectively communicate this long-term vision or the path that they want their organization to follow?
Well, core values are just not something that you have to put on a wall. And I think that a lot of companies don't live by their values. They're things that are on a wall, they're in a deck, they're somewhere. I have a funny story about a company that we worked with many years ago that had their values actually etched on the floor. So when you walked in, there was probably thousands of people in this organization.
You're stomping on your values?
You're stomping on your values or walking over your values. And when we came in to do the work, they were incredible values. But when we actually aligned everybody together and we said, what are the top 3 values that we have here as an organization? And hardly anybody could name them. And it was a huge metaphor at the moment, but I was like, this is very telling about how important it is to not only define those values, but attach behaviors to those values. What are your expectations of those values, of the people that are part of your team? And once you have that, I think that communication allows you to bring things back to those core values. Teams really need to understand the why, not just the what. And when you can impact your team in that way where you're not just communicating policy and you're not just values are part of a long distance memory. Like if you can actually embed them into everyday behaviors and actually reward and celebrate when your team members are adhering to those values, it's incredible what they're able to be able to do, even when the landscape is incredibly hectic. There's lots of competition. There's a lot of change and evolution in organizations right now, and everyone is asking those questions. So what kind of doesn't change though, or shouldn't change, is those values. We need to ask ourselves, does this decision or decisions align with who we are and where we're going? And if the answer is no, we pause. Maybe we don't move forward. And that's how we have to kind of anchor ourselves to those things.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Where tying it back to the values, because those shouldn't change. Even if strategic initiatives change, your values don't. What you stand for. One of the ways that we've done this in the past is we have like a global update meeting with the entire company is able to join, and instead of just preaching the values, what you talked about, celebrating. So we highlight individuals in the organization who've lived them and say, hey, by the way, we talk
Mhm.
about integrity, performance, collaboration.
Yeah,
Let me talk about so and so. They did a great job of collaborating, and so and so, share the story of your team member that did this. So
yeah.
it's them telling the story of us living the values that helps reinforce it in the other ideas. Otherwise, they're just platitudes. I mean, they're just fancy words. Like you said, words on a wall or on a floor in your case that
It's
you're
true.
sharing.
Not in my case, their case.
Yeah, sorry, in
Uh,
their case. Yeah.
but no, it's true. I mean, at Motto, we have an ecosystem of kudos. So we use a tool, and we're a remote culture. Our team is all over the world, and a couple of our key values is we before me, great not good, radical candor, playing offense, et cetera, et cetera. And we actually reward and recognize on a day-to-day basis. There's all sorts of kudos going on a daily basis in our Slack channels, in our team meetings, where we are celebrating teammates that have lived into that value or demonstrating that value on a regular basis, and being able to practice safe and radical candor, because you need to be able to have those conversations where, especially in creativity, where it's really subjective. We work on huge initiatives for companies where we're taking them through brand transformation, where we might work on, let's say they've come from a merger and acquisition, maybe they're going to IPO. They are experiencing major transformation. They need their brand to work really hard for them, meaning the brand no longer supports the weight of their ambitions. And so they need to evolve that brand, but not just evolve the brand and make the outward aspect of the marketing work and work harder, and the brand engine to work harder, but they need their people to support it and understand it. So by driving in and talking about the values and, like, how are we measuring success and how do we bring your values through the inside and to the outside world to your audience, that is where the real power is, where the superpower is for most organizations. And I'm a firm believer in having and working with teams whose values are very, very front and center. Because if they're people first and their culture first, we see a lot more understanding and a lot more intent behind the building of that brand than we do when those values are kind of hard to find.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So let's take it maybe the next step on the values, or maybe this is one of the values that maybe many companies would use. But how can leaders ensure transparency in their communication about potential policy impacts on a company? So we're talking about times of change, times of uncertainty. There will be likely different policy changes that are affecting an organization, a nation,
Mhm.
and how can leaders ensure transparency in their communication about the potential impacts of those changes?
Well, transparency is about not just sharing information, it's about sharing why you've made those decisions. And a lot of times I think as organizations, we forget to do that because we're busy, everybody's busy, and we have teams and there's work and there's pressure and there's competitive sets and there's all sorts of things that are outwardly pressing on the business at any given point. And sometimes we as leaders forget to communicate or don't communicate well enough. And what I think teams actually wanna know is they wanna know the why, not just the what. And I mentioned that earlier, but I think that's really fundamentally true. And sometimes it doesn't have to be huge sweeps of information that you're giving your team, but more so about how do you communicate policy, updates? How does it impact the way they work, the way that they move through their jobs? And how do you do that with clarity and honesty and context? No spin, just truth. I think Bob Iger does this really well at Disney. Such a strong communicator, I think, with, like, vision and how, his moves and the things that he's doing, he's always sort of looking and building that into his infrastructure and his leadership. And I think that type of playbook goes a long way. I worked a little bit with Gary Ridge from former CEO of WD-40. He coached me one time on a call, and he said every leader's job is to balance the scale of being tough and tender, and knowing when to bite your tongue and when to speak and when to share. And I think it's every leader's dilemma of, like, how much to communicate, how little to communicate, and just finding that balance. And I think we're all works in progress when it comes to leadership. But the best thing that you can do is just to try to communicate these decisions the best way that you can, and really keep people in the loop of, like, why you're making some of these strategic decisions, because you will find that they are more adaptive and they're more engaged when they feel part of that conversation versus shut out.
I couldn't agree more. You share what you can,
Yes.
and it helps them. If you're sharing, there's that opportunity for them to feel like they're part of this. They have an impact on it. It's not like it's just being shoved down their throats, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing, you talked about the balance between, being, tough versus, kind, or
Tender.
tender. Sorry, tough versus tender. Sorry. Um, but I also think there's a balance between, in leadership, you have to show that you know where you're going, but at the same time, you have to admit you actually don't know the future, right?
Okay.
So you talked about the why behind some of these things. So you share not just what we're going to do, but why we're doing it. And often when I do this, I'll tell them, I'll say, here's our reasons why, but we could be wrong.
Yeah. And a good debate is important, you know? I mean, us as leaders, we don't know all the answers. I think if you have a really tight culture and a really tight team, you can feel comfortable doing that. And I'm surprised by how many times that has been the case, where perhaps there's a client situation and it's complicated. Maybe they've switched gears, maybe they've switched strategies. You've kind of put all this work in, and then somebody else has joined the team and has sort of derailed your efforts, and you're now having to get this person moving in the right direction and getting and trying to pivot to a strategy that you'd maybe work 6 months on. So sometimes kind of going to your people and saying, what do you think about this situation? What is your recommendation? What do you think the why is? What would you kind of think about three possible solutions? And then what is maybe the prime recommendation that you might have? And what you'll find, interestingly enough, is that oftentimes they will already have the answer. And they'll just be looking to you to validate that, or you might be looking to them to validate it for yourself. But the beautiful thing is when you have that dialogue and you have that kind of creative culture, I think it allows you to get the best of each other, and to also point out blind spots where somebody just can't see all the different sides of this problem or challenge or whatever it might be. And we have this a lot with our clients sometimes. Their businesses are very in perpetual beta, I would say. They're moving quite quickly. There's a lot of updates and evolutions, and they're always looking for, ways to grow and scale and sometimes move quicker. And it requires a great deal of finesse to try to help teams think strategically first, because it's tempting to just want to jump right in and like fix a brand, when in fact you can find that sometimes it's actually a strategic problem. It can in some cases be a leadership problem. Sometimes it's a culture problem. It has nothing to do with the brand. It's just those things are impacting the brand. So having that stability and being able to ask questions of your team and vice versa, I think can be a very empowering thing across any company. It's a very valuable thing to have mentors and to be able to be mentored and menteed.
So you've talked a lot about, having this communication path. And you mentioned, making sure that you're living the values as one of those ways to ensure that, there's solid communication, and that you can achieve all that you want to achieve as we go forward. But are there other techniques to creating a safe space for this open dialogue, especially about sensitive topics in the workplace? How do we make
Mhm.
sure that, or do you have any, you know, a couple of tricks of the trade where people say, "Oh, I need to learn more about that. Let me call Sunny up."
I think you have to be a leader that you practice listen to understand. And that can be really hard if you are somebody who maybe is a high performer. You're very creative, you're very smart, you're very fast in the way that you connect the dots. And it can be very challenging to want to give the answers in scenarios when you actually think you know the answer, or you think you know the solution, or whatever that is. How can you listen to understand so that you can hear the diverse perspectives and give weight in the room to those, and sometimes in some cases be the last to speak? And I think empathy goes a long way. It's what binds visionaries to their teams. You can't build anything of significance by yourself. You need support. You need people to believe in what you're trying to do and accomplish in the world. It's not about agreeing with every viewpoint. It's about understanding the people behind them. And I like to think of diversity and diverse teams as like orchestras. And every orchestra needs a good maestro. And when you don't have that, you have a lot of sounds that don't that don't belong. And so I think that you need that level of finesse. As I said, I use that word sometimes, but you need to be able to help everybody kind of find harmony again, even when we don't disagree, or when we don't agree on certain topics. Something that a technique that I learned, I think I learned about this through a podcast or something about Jeff Bezos talked about disagree and commit. I think that's a really powerful technique, that when you kind of become locked up in your viewpoints, how can you achieve not consensus? Because I think consensus is challenging, especially in big groups of people or big teams or really highly performing teams who have lots of opinions and ideas of where to go and how to do it. We agree to build a rocket. We just don't build. We don't agree on like all the materials that we should use and the timing and all this other stuff. But I think disagree and commit could be a really powerful tool because what it does is uh, what it allows you to do is say, I know we all don't agree, but can we disagree and commit to the greater good of this project? Can I have your support? I know you don't agree with me, and I know you don't agree with the way that we're going about this, but can I have your support? And that's assuming that it's above board and things are right. I'm not, there's certainly
There's certain
omissions to that. Yeah.
issues, things like that.
Yeah,
You
of
don't
course. Of
have to
course.
agree at all.
No, not at all. But I think in some instances where, let's say in a leadership team, somebody's kind of conflicted about the word, a word or some wordsmithing around a big idea, for example, we'll see teams get really locked up in things like that, like really kind of minutia, but those words are very important. But you'll find that they can't become unlocked from it. And so it's important to try to move us along because we have to move the engine, we have to keep the momentum, we have to get the project going. So I think that disagree and commit can be pretty powerful in scenarios like that. Not all, it doesn't apply to everything, but in a great deal of those, I've seen that work extraordinarily well.
Yeah. So, you're bringing a couple of different thoughts to mind here. And so one, IPC, we have our big Apex Expo each year. One year we had Mayim Bialik as our keynote speaker. And she was fantastic. Many people know her as Sheldon's girlfriend, right? But we were back in the green room, and this was a time in which people were unfriending people from Facebook or
Sure.
disassociating because of political views or all. There's just a lot of contention happening at several years ago.
Very. It's
And
even hard, more contentious now.
exactly. And we sat there, and her manager walked in. She goes, "I've been talking with this guy. We have been conversing for 30 minutes. So we may not agree on everything, but we're having a civil conversation. This is fantastic." So, I'm reading a book that came out, I think it was just this year, by Charles Duhigg called Super Communicators.
Mhm. Great
Really
book
about listening not to agree or to convince, just to understand.
to understand.
And if you can reflect and people go, "Oh, they're relating," and you can sit there and say, "I've had something similar. It may not be the same thing. I may not agree with your position, but we can relate." And I just think that that is such a healthy message in today's world that and no, I have no affiliation with Charles Duhigg or the book, but I just thought it was
Yeah. You make
it's
some really good points. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many good techniques there. I think in order to disagree and commit, you have to have what you just talked about, which is there has to be some respect. You can I've had many political conversations with people who don't agree with me, I don't agree with them, vice versa, but the truth of the matter is that I believe that you can have really meaningful discussion and it doesn't have to go in this kind of awkward, this sort of reverse direction. I think you can have really, really civil, powerful, inspiring conversations around things, and they don't always have to be, that you walk away and you don't want to speak to them anymore, or you don't want to have any kind of healthy debate. You're they're there
yeah.
and et cetera. I mean, I
You
think
go
sometimes what
you go into a conversation and you've already decided what you're going to say.
yes,
It's like,
yes.
okay, well that's fine, but did you ever go in ready to listen to learn anything?
Yeah. Yeah. I've had incredible conversations where we started off not seeing eye to eye and then very quickly find that there's a lot in common and there's so much in common for so many people. And I think that sometimes we overlook the power of that.
Yeah, exactly. So let me twist it a little bit negatively here, if I can.
Uh-oh.
What are some of the common pitfalls that leaders should avoid when trying to navigate diverse opinions within their teams. So you're having a team meeting, and let's say your leadership team has come up with a new policy, new direction, new strategy, whatever it may be. And you come in and you say, okay, great, we've agreed as a leadership team. You come into your own team that you're leading and you say, here's what we're going to do. And all of a sudden, everybody and their brother is saying, you're crazy. That's wrong. What, you didn't even think of this. What about this? Blah, 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 blah. What are some of the pitfalls that people can avoid? What are some of the things you see people do? And then, obviously, what are the things, these are things that they should not do?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly a threshold there, that every conversation can take a different turn, and it becomes counterproductive and it becomes unproductive, and feelings begin to get involved and people start to get angry, and there's and as I said, I don't think that there is anything wrong with having healthy tension and healthy debate. I think when it starts to turn to certain degrees of where there's just, you can feel the energy shift in the room, the Zoom room, so to speak. I think as a leader, we have to sort of zoom out and try to bring a sense of balance back to the conversation, and also remind us of like our visions and our vision and our culture and our and our values, and try to get the conversation back on track. I don't know that you can solve all the world's problems in an hour Zoom call. Uh, so what can you achieve? And then sometimes it's best to just take a break, and let everybody kind of cool off and come back to it. I think there's so many techniques that you can deploy in those scenarios. I don't know if there's a one answer to it, but I do believe that it's the leadership's responsibility to protect the home, protect the heart of the home, the culture, from toxicity, from uh, not disruption, but perhaps negativity and toxicity and gossip and things where this really tears cultures down. I think that a lot of that happens on the leader's watch too, and I think it's really important to be in touch with your people and to hire, but also to fire when there are things that don't that it becomes destructive.
Yeah, I I'm reminded of a conflict that was being shared with me, and a colleague said, I would have just told that guy off. I don't know how you sat there so quietly and just
Yeah.
acknowledged and listened, because, yeah, I would have just said, you're a complete idiot, and just closed the door on it, and we can't do that. You have to, yeah, you have to acknowledge. Otherwise, people shut down and they're either going to leave and you're not going to get the value, or they just shut down and you're not going to get the value. That's why they're there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They're there to contribute. And if you run into a negative space, and it can be frustrating.
Mhm.
I mean, you've got the world solved and somebody brings up a problem. Sometimes they're right.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And another thing that you brought up there too is sometimes having so we have facilitators in our company. So we do facilitation for leadership teams, and we also do facilitation for ourselves. So we run on EOS. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but we run on the entrepreneur operating system, and we have leadership meetings, and they're all led by a facilitator. And we IDS everything. We talk about what is the issue, how are we going to discuss it and define it, and how are we going to decide, how are we going to solve. And the facilitation can be very effective too, because some people really shouldn't be the facilitator in that room. That's not your place. And you may not have the technical skills or the know-how to do it in a really, really good and effective way. And I find that when people are really good at facilitation, they can hedge out a lot of that and actually get people to have their voice heard, and then start moving us towards some decisions and technique there. And I think that's a very, very powerful thing.
That's a great suggestion. I mean, those facilitators, we use them on occasion as well. They're great at teasing out. Did I capture your nugget
Did
correctly?
I
Is
hear
this,
you correctly? Yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah,
And
and
then they
tough
put it
people
on
in the
board and okay, great, we've got it.
yeah,
Let's
yeah,
keep moving
we've
on.
captured it, let's go, yeah, and great suggestion, right? And they also can kind of, bring people who are very quiet. There's some very sharp thinkers who are often not the loudest person in the room, and if you're a really strong facilitator, you make a safe space, you carve out air in the room for them to have a platform, and for them to shine. And I think when you do that, you're able to get the best of all those perspectives. But I also think that as leaders, we should be very, very wise to encourage that, and to bring forward different points of view, because that's how you create that creativity. Sometimes you have a breakthrough. You can be hanging on something for a while, and then you'll kind of break for a little bit and you'll come back together and somebody's like, I got it. And or I have an idea. That's the four most powerful words in the world, is I have an idea. And nothing more powerful than somebody having an idea and then a team exploring that idea.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Talk to me a little bit about storytelling. How can leaders use storytelling to reinforce their company values and vision?
Well, we all love a good story. We all love a good comeback story. I think brands are stories that have to be told and have to be shared, and they have to be simple enough and impactful enough that they can be rallied around. We have something at Motto called the big idea worth rallying around. It's something that we ended up trademarking, the idea worth rallying around. And what we define that is as the signature idea that sits at the heart of your business and makes it famous. It's the thing that it's usually the beginning of a seed of an idea. Perhaps it's from a founder or founders or leaders, whoever was the visionary or visionaries of that company had an idea. They brought that idea to someone or a group of people, and they had said, "Will you help me build this?" And that idea takes shape in many, many ways. They then become companies. Those companies then become products. They become brands. They become things out in the world, to be protected and fiercely loved, and to continue to become the Nikes of the world. That are able to endure, and to unite everyone around just do it, or Apple's think different. Those are ideas worth rallying around. And so when we think of the stories that we help companies tell, it's always about trying to figure out, like, what is the big idea that we are trying to communicate to the world? And then how do we drive that through our vision, our culture, our brand, our activation? How do we continue to tell that story in a really profound way, in new and exciting ways, so that we can keep the energy around it for as long as we possibly can? And that's the power of a good story. They've been told for thousands of years. Um, and that's what makes good brands.
Yeah. Yeah. Storytelling, like you said, it's an emotional connection. You start it and then it just engages naturally. It's like, especially, I read some of these authors that they do a fantastic job. They're like, and, they give you the background and you start engaging with the character and then they stop. And now they have my attention. I got to read to the next part because I got to find out how the story
Yeah, it's a
ends.
page turner, isn't it? It's a page turner. Yeah, and that's what brands that's probably the greatest challenge and opportunity for brands in today's landscape, is how do you get people to keep turning the page, to keep turning and wanting to read more, to learn more, to continue to buy from you, to continue to want to be part of your conversation that you're trying to have, who want to help you build the vision of the world that you hope to achieve. To have that longevity is something that every brand tries to think about daily and mastermind daily and work on daily. Otherwise we wouldn't have the work that we have and are able to do, is because sometimes companies need to tell a different story. Sometimes the story that they've been telling has grown stale, and they need to find a new way to say similar things. Or sometimes it's about they brought cultures together and they need those cultures to buy into something that's more neutral, that everybody can belong. Maybe they had an idea in an old company and the new company has a new idea, and it's neither nor theirs nor the other. And how can you bring that together and bring everybody to rally around that and to get excited about it and mobilize around it? But storytelling is one of the most powerful aspects to a brand. It's not the only thing and tool that we have in our arsenal. It's about finding all of the ways that we can use AI, use the new tools and technology to help us stay competitive and stay relevant in this culture that is very, very moving quickly.
Yeah, it's accelerating at an exponential rate, and it's just so difficult to keep up.
It's dizzying.
We talked earlier about uncertainty, and uncertainty can drive some challenges into the culture. It can decrease morale because people don't have a firm ground to stand on. What are s- what advice would you have for leaders looking to rebuild team morale after a period of uncertainty?
Well, I think you have to normalize it first and foremost. And I think sometimes teams don't know how to do that. And you have to say, like, business is very erratic. Uh, and every organization that we work with, my co-founder and I, my partner and I, we work on these businesses all the time. And that's the only constant for them, is this sort of ebb and flow of a business. I mean, that's entrepreneurship at its finest. Don't be an entrepreneur if you want things to be straight up. It's up and down and up and down and up, and that's the beautiful thing. That's actually why you become an entrepreneur, because you love that. You love wrestling your vision forward in a world trying to stop you. And that's the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship and running a business and growing a company, is that you can control, to some degree, your vision, and you can control your reaction to the winds of the of the competitive landscape, right? Of business and everybody that's trying to nip at your heels. How do you try to stabilize a company? Well, I think that's your vision, your purpose, and your values. That's what you anchor everything to. If you don't know your vision, and you don't know what you will and will not do, meaning what the things are that you as a company will say no to. I believe that so much of business is about finding what to say no to, because you can say yes to a lot of things that don't make sense, that take you off track. Yeah, I mean, you could have a, I mean, you could just say yes to all the wrong things. And you have to consistently come back to that, and come back, like, what is my North Star, and what is our North Star, and what are we trying to accomplish in the world? And some of these things are like detours, they're distractions from the thing that you're trying to build. And so that is how you normalize, hey, there is a great deal of uncertainty out there, but look, we have a vision, we have a mission, we have core values, we have an amazing team, we've hired all the brightest minds, we've got a great group of people here. We'll figure this out, and that's how you march forward. The best advice is to know the hill you're marching towards, and know the flag that you're carrying. If you understand that, it allows you to kind of, where it gets tricky is when you're standing and your team is with you, and there's four mountains, and everybody's going which one to climb, and you as the leader can't point to the one and be like, no, 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 don't pay attention to those. That's the mountain right there. That's the one we're walking towards, right? That's the one we're marching towards. And I think that that's a great deal of confidence. And you might be wrong in some cases. There's a lot of companies that have had to pivot. They have to pivot. Sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes you don't like the product you put out is not great on day one. I mean, I think Apple launched the Apple One or the Apple Two, and it was not that great. And over time it got better and better and better.
Who remembers the new predecessor of the iPad, right?
I know. I mean, come on. It's like yeah, there's so many innovative failures, right? And I think that is part of innovation, is creating kind of these skunk works, where you actually just like build teams, and maybe even pack in a failure budget for your team. We have something like that at Motto, where give us the biggest idea that you have. We'll give you a failure budget to go explore it. And even if you fail, like, what did we learn? And and people are like so liberated by that, because the only reason you don't do things like that is because you think you won't have a job. If you miss the mark, you're gonna get fired. That's not true. You shouldn't create a culture like that. Now that's different than performance, right? Somebody's just constantly missing it, then you've built in a plan. Yeah, if they're just not the right fit, or the best thing you can do is get them to another company, or vice versa, and you try to support them as best as you can to grow them. But not every teammate is the right teammate for your company, and that's okay. And I think when you normalize that too, um, you'll find that you can create people to take a little bit more risk and a little bit more excitement, and bring crazy, audacious ideas to your company. And the question that you have to ask, which is kind of the topic of our next book, is not as the question, is it crazy? The question, is it crazy enough?
Is it crazy enough? I love it. That's great. Yeah, if you're talking about, I'm reminded of my book, Fire Your Hiring Habits, which this podcast is based on. And it's really says, hey, you need to, exiting an individual, if you do it the right way, will still benefit both parties. And
Mhm.
it's a small world.
It
Uh,
is.
they may recommend the next person to join your organization, or in 5 years, they
Yes.
may turn around and come back after they've gotten different skills and say, "Hey, I really loved working in your organization. Wasn't a fit then. Come on," we call it,
Yeah.
boot employees, I guess is how we refer to.
We've had boomerang employees too, where like they've left and they've come back. And I think that's a testament to the culture, but I also think it's a testament to that individual as well. And your stewardship of that situation. And again, as leaders, we try to get it right every time. But the best thing to recognize is when it's not working. I call this I talk about this thing called the click. And the click is when you try something or you put teams together and they just like can't, something's just, it's tough. They're trying to, it's like pulling a wagon uphill. And then you kind of change the roster and you move people around, you put them with different teams. And all of a sudden there's this click and this magic takes place. And I try to, early on in my career, I didn't understand the concept. I couldn't figure out sometimes. I was like, why is this project hard, or why is this team, challenging, or whatever it was. And it was because the click wasn't there. But if you find that click, you hear, it and you feel it, and you're like, okay, this is going to be a really great, this is going to be a really great thing, a really great project, a really great initiative. And you can find it when teams come together and they're aligned, and it's some amazing things there, and even when there is conflict, the conflict is exciting.
I love the idea of the click because, as soon as you said that and you're giving the example, I'm like, "Oh, yeah." Like,
Yeah. It's
our
easy conversation, right? Easy conversation. Like, ever sat in a cafe and tried to talk to somebody and you were just like, this conversation is not going anywhere. And it's just not the click. And I think that's completely okay. But when you know that you've had it, and it's specific, I think when you're working in innovative teams, when they really kind of click into place and they become this force, I truly believe extraordinary can happen, and also impossible becomes very, very possible.
Yeah, and, so we had a team, in India, actually, and they were doing fine, but it's like the atmosphere was just a little bit cloudy,
Mhm.
and we made one change,
Yeah.
and I remember going there, and the team is just a light. It's just crazy awesome, and they're
The
thriving, and
click,
so
yeah.
it's amazing how just a
Mhm.
single little change can just change it. And it wasn't like we, did half the personnel were the problem. Whereas you were wondering that at the time. It's like, oh, did we have just the wrong people? Are we doing the wrong direction?
Mhm.
Yeah. One person came in and kind of said, oh, what if we think about it this way? And now they're just out of
Yeah.
this world. And everybody else is, it's the same people, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And sometimes it's just that. It's just unblocking, what's blocked. And it's why they have Super Bowl teams. I mean, sometimes that that level of performance, that level of play, that level of camaraderie, there's so many things that come into play when you think about that. And I think it's a leader's job to try to figure out, how do I build those types of teams, because that allows you to really do incredible things in the world, do big things in the world when you get that right, when you figure out how to know that you're doing it and choosing and trying to make that and build that roster. It's really exciting.
Sonny, thank you for your time, and for our listeners out there, on Fire Your Hiring Habits. Stay tuned for the next episode as well. But be sure to look up Sunny and connect with her and her team if you're looking to bring your leadership and your group's branding to the next level.
Thank you.
This has been Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you want to empower your organization to reach new heights, go to johnwmitchell.com to find the techniques and tools you need to attract and retain the best team and boldly reimagine your workplace. Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell is a production of Forbes Books.